I
Thank
know
you.
we are both very excited to be here, and yeah, this is a project that Dave and I have been working on for quite a while. I think we're both really proud with what has come of the report. If you haven't seen it yet, we will make that link available to you, but you can find that on the Mortgage Coach website, blog. And we actually, I'll let Dave kind of introduce how it came about, but they did a lot of interviews of over 25 industry experts. Now I think that's up to 30-ish. And we compiled those insights into identifying some of the top challenges, top opportunities and strategies and recommendations that we've put into this report. So Dave, do you want to share anything else on how we came about to this report and some of the high level overview?
Yeah, so I interview a lot of leaders in the Mortgage Coach YouTube channel, and it just became apparent that this was not just a regular halftime year. You know, when June came, it wasn't like every June, oh, let's tweak my annual plan. It was like, let's blow up my plan. You know, it's like a whole new year. And so I started doing some strategic planning, and I just wanted to get a sanity check, like, the numbers, the data I'm looking at, what are the opportunities that I'm looking at. And I had ran into Kristin, and we started having a talk, and we're like, oh, let's write this state of the industry report. Let's interview like 6 people and create this piece of content that helps everybody with their planning, so that we know the brutal reality. We call them data points and trends. We align with what are some of the biggest opportunities and strategies, and then just really 3 parts: data, opportunities and strategies, and then specific recommendations. So it was a book, there'd be 3 chapters of the book. Now, of course, once we got through those 6 interviews, we're like, oh, let's do more. And it turned into a monster. I think we did 25 interviews before we actually published the report. And then we're still doing interviews. So it is over 30, it's like 31 leaders, ranging from CEOs to Strathmore consultants to, the #1 loan officer in America, and a number of top professionals. So really a diverse group of leaders in different roles, with the goal of what are the biggest opportunities that we should be focused on, and what are some of the best strategies that, if you want to crush it, that you should focus on. So that's what we got, and we're going to walk you through it. We want to do Q&A. So if you do have questions, please put those wherever Ralph told you to put it. I think there's a question section, and we'll make this as interactive as y'all want to.
Great. So this is how we structured the report. In the webinar today, we don't have time to go through all of the insights of the report, but I would love to hear more from you from the audience after you have been able to go through the report as well. So Dave and I are constantly improving on this and adding to it. So feel free to reach out, follow us on LinkedIn, connect with us there, and we'll continue to improve this and add additional content. So we want to kick this off by just giving a quick overview of some of the high level, like where we are in the market. So Dave kind of started here, but I'm going to let him introduce this before we get into some of the top challenges and then get into the opportunities. So Dave, I'll let you kick us off by talking about kind of the overall shift.
Yeah, so I mean, just from a shift to purchase, I mean, what are some of the biggest, most paramount things that have happened? And I mean, I do think this one is, it's fairly obvious, so this is not breaking news for anyone. But it is a purchase first market, probably will be for some time now. And so just acknowledging that data. I think one actionable thing that I thought was interesting is Shop Minosian, who's the #1 loan officer in America with guaranteed rate, the previous year had done over $2 billion in production. And so how did he take action with this? Is he said, hey, when I fine-tuned my goals at the halfway point, instead of just redoing my goal based off of, okay, we're going to do, I don't remember what it is, 1.5 million in production. He decided to say, you know what, our goal for this year is 1 billion in purchase business. So while refi is still part of the goal, there was really a real significant strategic pivot in how he did the goal. to help align around this shift in the marketplace. You want me to keep going, Kristin? So this one, you know, and we try to provide some different context and perspective. So this particular one doesn't just show interest rates in the shift today, but it puts it in a historical perspective and calls out specifically that this is the largest rate change in recorded history, and it's 65% increase in rates over 1.3 years. So just trying to put some very specific context around it. You know, not that this is a news flash, but the more when you're doing strategic planning, you can really see the trends and the reality, and then we'll get to it. You know, what opportunities and strategies does this create? Again, this is something where we did interview the chief economist, Mike Frantantoni from the MBA, and another little nuance to the report. When you go to the report, there's towards the very bottom, there's a resource section, and there's a link to the actual interview, so you can watch this one. It was like 10 to 12 minutes, and then we also have a link to the transcript, because that was part of how we created it. We recorded it. It's on YouTube. You can listen to the conversation, and then there's a transcript. And what we really wanted to pull out here was to just show the difference in production in different channels: refi, purchase. Kristin, does the next slide show? Show me what the next slide is real quick, because there was yeah, guys. So this I felt, no, go back to that one. This is a bit of a scoop, because, you know, I've listened to a lot of people in the industry just basically say, hey, it's bad, but it's still the third best year in history. And I was saying that a lot from stages, and I still do say that from a lot, but that's as it relates to volume. And it's a little misleading because values have gone up so much. But when you look at the number of transactions, guys, I mean, it's pretty stunning how hard we got hit in this market. And I personally haven't heard people talking about just, you know, when you look at the number of actual transactions, go to the next slide, Kristin, and you really drill down on the refis. Look at that, guys. If you go down to the very bottom, 2022 refis are like 706,000 compared to last year, the last 2 years, where it's over 8 million. So it's literally, I think it is the worst year in refinance in recorded history, and no one's talking about that. So I just think when doing strategic planning, it's important to face the brutal reality, you know, like brutal reality, like this is a landslide pivot to purchase market, and it's a little more intense than I think is being broadcasted. But again, if you acknowledge it, if you understand it, if you plan around it, it can really help you gain a competitive advantage in the market. Anything
Great.
you want to add?
No, just, I mean, this was pretty surprising to me. And I think that, you know, you hear people on different sides talking about how, you know, this is a big opportunity, and it absolutely is. But I do think it is important to face the fact that this is a really difficult market, and the shift has happened so suddenly. And that's something that we heard across every expert and everyone that we interviewed. Every, you know, piece of research that we looked at was just like how quickly and suddenly this shift is happening. And so the majority of our report is focused on understanding the challenges of that specific, the purchase market, and recommendations on how to reach them. So I think that, yeah, to your point, just understanding how much the purchase origination volume has stayed consistent, and yet the dip that has occurred is going to be significant enough that people have to really be very intentional about shifting their strategy. So, I'm sorry, I was on mute earlier. I'll just stay off of mute. But I want to move into the first challenge. That is another very obvious one, which is affordability and low inventory. But I do think that there were some really interesting insights as we dug into this. And this came mostly from some of the economists that we interviewed, and as well as some additional research. But I think that if we're talking about the shift to reaching the purchase market, you have to talk about affordability. And I will say that from Keeping Current Matters, I can't remember which interview this originated from, but the local markets are experiencing higher inventory than originally forecasted. So that's one positive that is in the case of the existing space. And yet everyone has agreed, including Logan kept, I can't say his last name, but with Housing Wire's chief economist, he kept saying that this is still a savagely unhealthy market. And we are in a space where we have to understand, relative to what has existed in years past, we're still in this, we had, like, I think when we did this interview a couple months ago, there are about 1 million homes on the market, and we should be closer to 1.5 for that to be even remotely healthy. So anything you would add to that, Dave, before I get into some of the causes there?
Well, I did want to call out that we did link to all the resources. So when we were calling things out, we tried to give you a link to go to that. And at the very bottom, underneath all the interviews, the transcriptions, and the recordings, we put all the sources. So Keeping Current Matters did a great job of just helping us lay out this content. So just want to make sure y'all know how to go there and drill down on it. And also, part of our intention was to curate some of the most important content to help make great business decisions, but also to create content so that you guys could use that on social media, or you could use that in presentations. One of the things that I've noticed among interviewing the most successful loan officers in America, one, a lot of them use Mortgage Coach to deliver a personalized presentation to a consumer, but a lot of them have slides. This is a market where you need to educate consumers, and you need to let the consumer know, what, I've got your best interest in mind, and I'm an expert on the market. So we tried to make it so that these slides, like, literally you could put them into your own presentations and cite all the research. So check that out, and hopefully you guys will use it. You can take a screenshot. I know also in the handouts, the slides that we're going through right now are there for you to grab. But Kristin and I were like, okay, what's most important to make decisions and identify the best strategies? And then how can we also give that to the community so that we're giving them visual resources to upgrade their presentations?
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought this up. So the purchase market is a very anxious market, and especially in this time, and I think that the more that, and actually one of the biggest insights that we found from the 2021 Next Gen Homebuyer Report was that distrust was a huge factor. For people, these were all 3,000 Next Gen homebuyers who already bought a home or were about to buy a home, and 2 in 3 said that they did not think lenders were trustworthy or reliable. And that was before we took this kind of shift in the market. And so I think there's a lot of anxiety and distrust out there. And the more that you can educate, the more receptive they are to not only trusting you, but also trusting the market and understanding, what their best next move is. So that's something I've been talking a lot about, and we definitely want to, that was one of the primary goals when we first started, was to make some of this content more digestible and easier, more accessible to people to be experts in their local market. So one of the reasons that we have low inventory is, again, not surprising, but something to reiterate. We had supply chain issues, labor challenges through the pandemic. We were already in a place of low inventory post financial crisis, but there's also some restrictive zoning laws that have made the demand, have not met the demand for multifamily units. I think I've got this on the next slide here. Especially next gen home buyers and younger home buyers are looking for more multifamily units. They tend to be more 1 to 2 person households, but there's been limited construction due to zoning laws. So that was an interesting insight that we found, and a lot of builders have been challenged by. And then of course we have seen a lot more institutional investors in the market, highest rate of investor purchase properties than ever before, just last year. So the existing single family inventory has been extremely low. And again, looking at this over time, you can see 2022 lower than it's ever been. And so that's something, you know, to keep in mind. Here's the point around delayed marriage and household formation, which has caused a demand for multifamily construction. In 2018, less than 60% of people 25 to 34 lived with either a spouse or partner versus 80% in 1967. So we've had a big shift in the way that we have, like, our approach to the nuclear family. That's been a big thing in conversation, but it's also the way that we think about housing. So a lot of people are choosing to live with friends or, and a lot of times for economic reasons, but there's just smaller households, especially in that millennial generation. You can see some of the data here. This is from the Urban Institute, and we did link some of the articles around that in the report as well. And then this one I wanted to bring up specifically. This one was really surprising when you looked over time. Like, we knew that inflation was obviously really high, but if you look at the home price to median income ratio over time, it's even higher than it was in the housing bubble, and that's continued to rise. This was coming from January of 2022, and that has risen since then. So if you look at even the starting salary and adjust for inflation, you look at a lot of data points across the board from 1980 to today, you can see just a huge gap when it comes to affordability. So right out from the start, that we're not looking at, these are apples and oranges really, whenever you're looking at affordability.
Yeah, I want to call out something. I'm going to get a little ahead on a recommendation here, which we'll cover later on. But, you know, the best loan officers that are executing the best in the market right now, they're selling the problems they solve, not selling loan programs and rates. You know, like, rates are not attractive. When a consumer hears interest rates today, they're surprised, they're sad, they're upset, and they're shopping. But affordability, I mean, we knew home affordability was a problem going into this, so I don't think that was like, oh, what a shocker. But when you put it into context of the historical, where it is historically, it absolutely put an exclamation mark that this is a huge problem in America. This is a huge problem. And so, and we'll get into it later, but like some of the recommendations, like 2-1 buy downs. What can a loan officer do, and how are you training your sales force so that they can help solve the affordability issue for people? MI, and how a loan officer is expert at annual MI, monthly MI, single premium, you know, different MI products, like affordability is an issue, you know, how you're showing options, down payment assistance. So it just something I knew that was important. I came out of this research going, you know what, it's the most important thing that we need to address as an industry. And then we need to train our loan officers, and we need to train our organizations how we market, how we sell, how we advise consumers. We need to help solve this for people so that people can get into homes, and people, you know, a rent versus own analysis has never been more important, because if affordability is a challenge and the consumer, like, that's, you know, I can't afford it. Well, you need to show a consumer how you almost can't afford not to have it, because this is what's happening with rental prices. So, you know, which problem do you want to be part of? Do you want to have no control and be in the rental space where someone else is driving your housing costs, or do you want to get in the game? And, you know, yeah, it's hard. Yes, it's tough. But if you get in the game, look at where you're at. So got a little ahead of it. It's just this particular chart by itself makes the case that this is absolutely one of the problems we need to solve through loan product. But I'm going to focus on, you know, everyone watching this, you're a leader. You know, do your loan officers know this problem with the clarity that they should? And are you training them how to, you know, use MI products, use buy down products, use down payment assistance products, so they can be the, you know, the leader in solving these problems for their realtors and for their home buyers. So,
yeah. It reminds me of recently, I shared this on LinkedIn, but I had some friends getting together for dinner, and we had just published the report, and they were saying, like, man, I guess I really missed the boat on buying a home. And, you know, it made me realize how much we are constantly, consumers are very anxious and they're hearing a lot of negativity, and there is reason to feel that, obviously, but also if they had information to be empowered themselves with like what is their individual situation, they would think differently, you know. And so as I explained more of the market, I even pulled up some of these slides, started putting them together, and they were like, oh, okay, like just understanding where we are changes the way that they feel about approaching the market, because right now they're so overwhelmed by everything that they are not even thinking about stepping forward with it. But if they did get a rent versus own or something like that, they would be able to see what it means for them specifically. And that's how you overcome, I think, things like a rent versus own and looking at reviews and things like that, where you are overcoming that distrust and anxiety. That's going to be one of the biggest challenges outside of affordability, all that kind of stuff, rates. It's really around that kind of emotional aspect that you need to overcome through information that empowers the consumer.
Boom. Couldn't agree more. Real quick, Kristin.
Yeah.
I want everybody to think, because some of these things you go through, you're like, I know that. But I also like, well, what are you doing about it? And are you doing specific training with your loan officers about what we just talked about? So I just ask everybody, because I do think this is one of those ones where we all know about it at a certain level, but I don't think we as an industry are doing as much about it as we could. And here is my biggest reason why you should, because it's more loans. Like if you do these trainings, if you just, for example, if and we'll get to it in recommendations, but if your loan officers could create a great presentation around 2-1 buy down versus price reduction, and they're out there advocating in their local markets, it's more loan apps in 2 weeks. Like this is not just like, oh, help America. It is help America, and it is help underserved families, but it's also loan apps next week if you're doing something about it. So anyways, keep going.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, I'm going to actually pass it to you to talk about this section, untapped equity in the market. It's super interesting and definitely one of the most interesting insights I think we gathered from this. So I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, well, this is just one of clearly the biggest opportunities in the mortgage industry this year and going forward. So, you know, first we'll just start by, you know, highlighting the data and just the stunning increase in home equity, tappable home equity, by the way. This was from Julian Hiberon, the Basis Point. Chris and I are both big fans. If you are not following his blog, thebasispoint.com, you know, you're missing it. He's just an incredible curator of content, and he always has a little edge, a little sass in how he communicates. So I really like him. But you know, so that's the data point. Like it's gone up. We know that. Let's keep flowing through the slides unless you want to add something, Kristin.
No, just gonna say that, I mean, I think here we're talking about the home price performance increasing, but I wanted to remind you that we have the Todd Bellinger data here coming up, because I think that really plays into this whole conversation.
Yeah, and you know, and it's not looking like it's going to go down. You know, now it's a zip code market. Every market's different, and there are markets that are softening. And I can't remember the exact date on this data, but you know, it's getting rougher, and we are updating the report. So while we released it over a month ago, we freshened it up last week. So if you read it, there were some things that we left out of it. You know, we're going to talk about the Latino opportunity. We're going to talk about some numbers that we've updated. Interest rates have gone down. So we've been updating this report. We probably will through this month. You know, I don't think we'll be updating it as we enter Q4, but we will continue to update this. Next slide. Guys, this was, again, not something I did not know, but something I did not know with this clarity. And this was actually published on Todd Bellinger's blog. Todd is a professor at North Carolina University. He was also one of the founders with Garth Graham of Mortgage.com. Garth Graham from Stratmore, super smart guy. And he's always, you know, just finding these data points, and about 3-4 times a week, he does a blog post. And we put a link to that in the group. But check this out. So there's a top 1% of the wealthiest people in America, but 99% of Americans have 85% of their wealth in their personal residence. And they are responsible for 85% of all debt. So to me, the takeaway there was the mortgage, managing your equity in your home, managing your liability and debt decisions is by far the single most important financial planning decision that Americans make. Now, that's not new information for everyone here, but I would challenge everyone listening and tuning into this, when we think about how we help deliver advice, or we really helping families manage this strategically, like it's a strategic financial planning decision. And I would make the case that most loan officers, most lenders sell loans. Here's your rate, here's your payment, here's your cash to close, and it's a transaction. And people don't want transactions. People want to be financially free. Most people, they don't get a loan because they want a loan. They get a loan because they want a home, and they don't just want a home. They want a home that's debt-free someday. So again, this slide is really important because it's the North Star that we are the most important financial planning decision, and that the lending industry and mortgage professionals can truly be the light. Like, we can be more valuable than CPAs. We can be more valuable than financial planners. And this is just the data that shows just how important we are to the financial well-being of America and to sustainable homeownership. But we do need to go beyond this transactional engine. And today it's a competitive advantage. But I don't know, anything you want to add to the slide? I would, one last thing, I think Kristin and I plan to iterate this. Like, we took this from a blog post, and it's kind of hard to really get the data. So I would push everybody, go to your marketing team, arm your loan officers, take this data and iterate this with your brand, iterate this with yours, and go out there and evangelize just how important we are. But I would love to see lots of versions of this. Share it, tag Kristin and I on social media, and know that her and I plan to take this data point and these insights and tell the story in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, we were actually just tagged in something on social media where someone had made a TikTok video out of the content, and just love seeing new creative ways of presenting the data. So definitely encourage people to take it and do something new with it and share it with us too. But I do think that this conversation leads really well into the next section about the demographic shift. So I'm going to move into that unless there's anything else, Dave, that you want to share on the untapped equity or equity rich area.
Well, just one thing. I do not see any questions yet, so I do want to call out to the audience that Kristin and I, while we love collaborating and talking to you guys, we would love to talk with you. So just a push to add a question if there has been a takeaway that you thought was either something you didn't know, or you're like, that's the goal so far. Hopefully you got something 35 minutes into this, but if you could, let us know what was most important, or ask us a question so we can answer them at some point.
Yeah, and Dave, you may not see them on your end, but I'm looking on my end. There's nothing that's come in yet that hasn't been more tech related or anything like that. So we're good right now, but we encourage everybody, like Dave mentioned, to get those questions in the question box. We certainly want to hear from you.
And as Dave mentioned, we do encourage conversation around this. There's differing opinions about things. I mean, we had a section in there about crypto and that I shared specifically on LinkedIn last week, I think, and I got some feedback of like, I don't know that this is really the direction we're going in, and people kind of had some debate going. So we found that 12%, this is from an interview with Jim Park from the Redfin research, that people last year, 12% of people use some form of crypto for their down payment. So that's really interesting, and definitely, looking at blockchain as a whole, how that's going to play into the real estate market, and the way that we even, using the metaverse for the way doing virtual home tours and things like that. I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff to talk about, smart contracts, everything there. So I'm getting ahead of myself on the digital side, but I wanted to share that as an example. If there's stuff that you think like, I'm not sure about this or would like to expand more on this, we do take that and incorporate it into like this section we've changed recently, and love to have those kinds of conversations.
Hey,
so
Kristin,
especially when we, yes, go ahead.
Dave, I guess we ask and we shall receive, right? So we got some questions, not really questions, but comments that I think are bear mentioning. People are saying, first of all, the information is fantastic, but people are saying they love the point on helping others be a planner with your clients, not just a seller, to what Dave was mentioning earlier. So I think that's resonating with the team and with our group here. People are somebody referenced page 19. I'm not off the top of my head, don't remember what page that is, but so many people keep saying we're going to have a housing bubble, that prices will come down. However, this proves values will still appreciate, just not as rapidly, so to speak. So the rent to own conversation needs to happen sooner than later. So I think that's an excellent point. We got people that are just talking about selling the problems we can solve, not selling rates or loan programs. Love that. So just some great comments and takeaways that the group is sharing with us here right now.
Thank you,
yeah,
everybody. That's what we're talking about. Keep it coming.
Yeah. One of the data points that we shared was that I think last year homes appreciated, I hope I'm not misquoting this, but like 19% or something, and this year it's going to be 6%. Maybe it wasn't 19%, that might be a bit high, but it was something really high in comparison. And so you think like, oh, look at how much this has dropped or slowed, but it's still appreciating. And I think a lot of consumers don't know that. Like at that dinner table conversation I was talking about, I shared that statistic or that projection, and they were really surprised by it because they were expecting to see such a significant fall based on the conversations. And so, again, leading with that kind of education is really important. Okay, so talking about the demographic shift, millennials account for 44% of home buyers today. So, of course, we're continuing to increase in the number of younger home buyers, millennial, Gen Z. Specifically, this market has a lot more, a big cultural shift, thinking about how we've entered adulthood during or right after the financial crisis, and where I think nearly half of millennials identify as ethnic minorities. We, of course, entered adulthood during a big tech boom. And so this has been a big shift in just the overall culture, approach, and expectations in the purchasing process, which we dive into a little bit in the report. I wanted to highlight some of the stats that we gathered last year through the National My-sponsored report. We found that education was a big factor. 1 in 4 said their biggest challenge, not like everyone said that education was a challenge, but 1 in 4 said their biggest challenge was a lack of understanding. 1 in 5 said they were not confident in any step of the home buying process. There was a lot of skepticism. And again, this is done back in September of last year. So this is well before today. We're actually putting together a report for today, or to launch a study to launch this year, and very curious about how this has shifted. And as I mentioned before, distrust was a really big factor. So as we talk about all of this information and the changes in the market, again, if you're solving for the problems of your consumers, a lot of those problems are around education, anxiety, and trust. And these are people that were already in the market. So a lot of people that are even just talking about or thinking about wanting to buy a home, they are even more so feeling that lack of education or confidence or trust. And then we want to talk a little bit about the racial wealth gap. Of the 44% of millennials who are home buyers today, or of the 44% of home buyers who are millennials, 84% of them are white. So, and like I said, nearly half are, I think 46% of millennials identify as ethnic minorities. There's a big gap there. And what is a bit disheartening is if you look into the data, that gap is actually widening since the 60s. It's not actually, like, we expect that to decrease as we continue to become more progressive in our understanding of the wealth gap and that type of thing, but it does continue to widen. And that's because a lot of it is because of the generational wealth gap that exists. But the median income of the average millennial home buyer was $100,000, which is 54% higher than the median income of Black millennials. And if you look at wealth of parents, that's a lot of where that gap is coming from. So the average wealth, I think I have it in here. Yeah, median parental wealth, 84,000 for white millennials, 15,000 for Black millennials. So there's a huge shift there when you look at the generational transfer of wealth among communities of color versus white millennials. So, and then on the positive side of the communities of color, as we talk about the housing shift, there is a significant housing boom amongst Latinos, and they are the only ethnic group projected to increase their homeownership rate. By 2040, 20% of young households will be Latino. That is the fastest growing demographic, ethnic demographic. And in this specific segment, it's really important to think about how you're approaching and reaching this market and look at the specific challenges and opportunities in all of the ethnic segments, but understanding that there are going to be specific challenges. In the Latino market, you've got larger average families, family size, and lower credit scores on average, lower incomes on average. So there's going to need to be, in addition to a lot of cultural dynamics, you need to understand the specific challenges in approaching this market, but also, again, this really big opportunity. If you are not aware, I used to own the company Cultural Outreach, which I sold to Tony Thompson at NAMBA, and they help lenders understand how to better reach and serve young and diverse markets. And they have a lot of really great content, educational content, social media content that is specifically designed for communities of color, Latino, African American, and Black communities that are really well designed to reach that market. So I encourage you to check into that resource too if you are not aware of it.
All right, guys.
So now we're gonna, yeah.
So I always like, okay, so that's the playing field, that's the data, that's the weather in the industry right now. One of the things we've been talking about a lot at Mortgage Coach and Sales Boomerang is just how we're going to make change. And we've been using Mount Everest as a metaphor. Like, hey, it takes weeks to get the base of Mount Everest, but then to climb Mount Everest, it's tough. And the two most important, well, there's three things. You gotta have the right oxygen, because oxygen matters when you're going to the tallest mountain in the world. And you gotta have the right people, you gotta have the right gear, and you gotta have the right weather. So guys, that's the weather, and we can't control it. Like we just have to play within that field. So here's what we broke down in terms of opportunities and strategies. And next slide. And first and foremost, my first interview with Clayton Collins, I actually thought this was his quote when he said it, because if you listen to the interview, you're like, Clayton, that's so good. Well, he was quoting Winston Churchill, never let a good crisis go to waste. And I do think, from the first interview I did to today, like the crisis has gotten worse, it's gotten tougher, but we got to have that mentality. And for anyone listening to this, I would just ask you to audit yourself. Am I embracing this crisis and opportunity? And it's twofold. It's like, hey, our businesses are being right-sized, and this wealth gap is getting wider, and affordability is getting tougher, and I could go on, but there is opportunity. Like for the lenders and the loan officers, they can kill it. Like Nicole Ruth, who did 390 million last year, she's top team at Fairway, is up 4.6%. Like she's up. And part of why she's up is she's an educator. Like her platform is around education. And she doesn't think of herself as a loan officer. She's like, I'm helping families achieve financial freedom for real estate. Like I'm the captain of the wealth team. I am delivering advice and value beyond what CPAs and financial planners are. Yeah, I know loan programs. Yeah, I got a great team. I have competitive rates. I can close loans on time. But she is a captain of a wealth team that's leading with education. And so I can't emphasize enough that if you want to be part of the solution in America, part of the solution within your company, we need to lead with education, and we need to go beyond we're just lending people money. No, we believe that through borrowing, you can achieve financial freedom, but you've got to be strategic. You've got to be smart. So takeaway number one, just keep flipping through the screens as you want and add your color as you want.
Yeah, I want to mention really quick, when we did the next gen research, we found that, of course, number one, people go to Google for information, in addition to friends and family and social media. And I do think that the more anxious people are, the less likely they are to immediately reach out to an expert. They don't know whether they can trust you. They don't know who to reach out to. So they're Googling things, they're looking on social media. If they get a referral, they do look you up. But that makes it that much more important that you are building a brand, sharing content that says that you are an expert who can be trusted. And one of the interviews that we did recently was with our number one top performer at experience.com. He's rated the top of 40,000 loan officers on our platform. And Dave was asking him questions about like, what's the first thing you do whenever someone comes to you? And he says he immediately, in addition to being an avid mortgage coach user, he immediately shares reviews. And he said specifically that it helps with, he doesn't get people rate shopping him. And especially in a climate like we're at today, that becomes so important that you are getting ahead of those things, telling people, yeah, go look me up on social media, look up my reviews. And then here's information that can empower you to make a smart decision for yourself. In a world where we are very anxious, distrusting, something like Mortgage Coach allows you, and reviews and having a social media presence, all of that, those are things that allow the consumer to feel safe. And if you heard me talk about anything, I always talk about how important it is for consumers to feel that sense of safety. And so I just wanted to emphasize that point around education. Anything else you want to share, Dave, on that point?
There's two thoughts. I mean, you've got to deliver education when you deliver rates and fees. And the cornerstone to education is options, showing the cost of those options over different windows of time, and then showing strategies to pay off their debt faster. Because remember, if financial freedom is a goal, you got to show them how to make the right liability mortgage decision. And then should they be saving money so that one day they could just pay off their mortgage, or should they be prepaying their mortgage? And so this is all part of it. And one clear takeaway came is that the lenders and the loan officers that were winning in this market, they were measuring more than just loan production and units closed. They were measuring at scale customer satisfaction. They were measuring at scale conversion, credit reports versus open loans. They were measuring at scale profitability. Like some loan officers are costing the company 39, 40 basis points. Some loan officers, even in this market, are single digits, 9 basis points. I mean, so really putting the focus on metrics beyond how many loans will we close, what our volume is, conversion, customer satisfaction, and profitability. But I'm not just saying this because I'm Mr. Mortgage Coach and I'm the founder. The total cost analysis has disrupted the fee worksheet. Like giving a family a rate quote does not solve the problems we have in America, and it doesn't give you a competitive advantage. Next slide. And obviously you can reach out to me if you want to learn more about that. And then number two, guys. Oh, go ahead, Kristin.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that when we talk about like video or education, any of these things, it's all about helping you become seen as the guide through this process. And I think, video does humanize that a lot. But I know this is something that people understand very well, so we don't have to spend too much time on it. But I think that it's an important factor to remember that people who are anxious and nervous and distrusting, they want to see you on video because it allows them to build that trust. So you can continue.
Yeah, and I'm going to be quick about it too, because it's been covered. Everybody, I think, knows it esoterically, but Nicole Roth, who's up, Denise Donahue, who I'm going to be interviewing on our show, who closed like 700 loans last year, she's up. And you know what? They're using video at scale. And that doesn't just mean they have YouTube channels. Well, they do have YouTube channels, but like if you could show the next slide, they're using video in all different channels. They're doing text video. They're on a couple different social media channels, but in a mortgage coach, we build video into our platform. So I just push everybody watching this, listening to this, you need to continue to make video, ubiquitous within your tech stack. And then you need to continue to shine a light on the loan officers within your platforms that are doing it right. This is the loan officer of the future if we want to change. And then leveraging your database. And when I talk to realtors and I talk to loan officers, I go, you got to start thinking like billionaires, and you need to start thinking like Rocket, thinking like Amazon, and data is the key. And I also advocate to every lender on this, every loan officer watching this, your database is your number one priority. It's your number one asset. And if you leverage your database properly, tappable equity, how you communicate, you can become more valuable to realtors. Like we're seeing a lot of loan officers and lenders that are actually getting real estate companies and realtors to put their database in their fintech powered CRM. Because as a lender, you can get insights. Like if we click a few screens, this next screen shows this is what every realtor's database looks like. And this is what most lenders' database looks like. Like they don't have insights. And then if you look at Rocket's database and you look at Zillow's database, it looks like this. Like they know when a credit report is run and there's an inquiry. They know when someone's credit score went up by 50 points. They know when there was a life event that makes that consumer more likely to be ready to buy a new home, sell a home. And so, that's our cry to the industry, just a clear suggestion, is you need to have a database that looks like this. And as the Chief Innovation Officer of Mortgage Coach and Sales Boomerang, we're going to this era that's even beyond database triggers. Like there's a lot of, call it database triggers. You need borrower intelligent insights. And so a borrower intelligent insight is an alert that tells you, hey, this consumer looks like they may be ready to move up, or this consumer looks like they are really should be interested in a reverse mortgage, or this consumer looks like they're a first-time home buyer. Whatever the insights, this one looks like a cash out refinance. And then you're also giving them intelligence. You're putting a presentation in front of them where you're educating them. This is the future. This is obviously what we do at, well, I don't know if it's obvious, but know that this is what we do at Mortgage Coach and Sales Boomerang. And, reach out to me at Dave@Mortgage Coach if you want to learn more. But leveraging your database is a massive opportunity for everyone on this, especially in a market like this. And this was my database years ago. I started in the mortgage business 36 years ago, and this was my database, my CRM back in the day. So just never been more important that we don't do this. We use technology. It's the wave of the future, and it's now.
I want to wrap up just by reminding everyone that it's really important to be the best at customer experience, especially when you're reaching the purchase market. We go into detail in the report with specific action items that you can do to become the best at customer experience. But it really comes down to how are you delivering an automated process, personalizing the experience, as we talked about, building an online reputation that creates that sense of safety and awareness with consumers, and then being the expert. So at experience.com, we look at very specific touch points to stay connected with the consumer. whatever you're using, whether it's us or whether you're doing this on your own, highly encourage that you are collecting feedback at specific touch points to make sure that you're staying connected with the consumer. Because again, in a market where people are hearing lots of things, there's a lot of anxiety. Whenever someone is, especially like at the beginning of the process, they fill out the application, a lot of people are going to pull out or start rate shopping. And the more that you can stay connected and show up as a leader, an expert guide through this process, the more that you are going to see better conversions and happier customers. So I want to see if we have any questions. I know we just have a couple minutes here, and Dave, I'll let you close with any thoughts, but I want to encourage everyone to visit the blog. You can click on that within the slides and read through the full halftime report and then stay connected with us as we continue to make updates. So Dave, any last thoughts?
Yeah, my closing thought is, I try to put a post. Well, Chris and I both are pretty dedicated to bringing thought leadership on LinkedIn. So, I would just push you all to follow us. We put a link to the blog, which we will continue to update. We both love this industry. We love loan officers. We love lenders. We love all the folks that support this industry. And we'd love to connect with you. So follow us on social media, and really, really appreciate this opportunity, Ralph. Thanks for inviting me to this update and this party.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both. I mean, what a great amount of information you have shared with us and insight. I did have one question I think you can address real quick. It had to do with the amount of equity that there is in the market today. And somebody asked, what is the normal increase in value year over year that should be in a normal market, not in what maybe we've seen in prior years?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would just be making up an answer if I just winged it. But stay tuned. Kristin and I will, maybe Kristin's going to throw something at you, but I don't know.
I know we have this in the report, but I can't remember what it was. I think it was like 9% was the norm, but that maybe is what was high last year. So don't listen to what I have to say, but yeah. We do have a section in there.
But by the way, it's such a great question. So if it's not in the report, it will be within a week, because it is. And I think that's always what we want to do, is give the nuance and the context so that you can really serve a consumer. And I can just right off the top of my head, hey, this is what it did. This is what it usually is. We'll make sure we net that out. So stay tuned on the report. Sorry, I could give you a quick answer though.
Well, and I know, and there were a lot of other kind of quick questions that came up here and there. I'm going to compile all those. I'm going to commit to everybody that has sent me, and I've been kind of typing back and forth with many of you. Anybody that sent a question that we didn't get to address here, I'm going to compile all of them. I'll send them to both Kristin and Dave, and that way, follow them on, especially on LinkedIn, and they can start addressing a lot of those things in the, a lot of your questions along the way. So that way we can make sure that we get all your questions answered. For those of you that have been asking me about a recording, just email us at training@nationalmi.com. We can get a link sent out. There will be an email that goes out automatically from GoToWebinar to you within the hour. It actually has a link to the actual report that Dave and Kristin have been referencing. So you have that direct link ready to go in that email. If you can't find it, or if for some reason that email doesn't come in, email us, training@nationalmi.com. We want to connect with you. Reach out to your National MI account manager. They can get you that information too. So just know, a lot of great stuff coming your way. As always, check out our other webinars. We have Kristin here all the time, giving some great thought leadership and just some great information. We're probably going to have Dave back on in the future. So just check out our calendar of upcoming events, nationalmi.com/MIU, like Mortgage Insurance University. And with that, I just want to thank all of you. I know Dave had to jump off, but Kristin, anything you want to add before we wrap it up here?
No, just thank you again so much for the time. There's so many insights from the report that we did not get to, and I almost am like, I don't know, but maybe there's more coming from us on a future webinar. But I really encourage everyone to go through the report for those. So thanks again,
Yeah,
Will.
and it's a long report, but it's definitely worth the time and investment to really get that insight as to what's happening in the market, how top producers are continuing to thrive in this market, and that way you can learn from them and take that too. So on behalf of Dave Savage, Kristin Messerli, and myself and the entire National MI team, I thank you all for attending. Thank you for all the great feedback that we're hearing here in the chat. And we wish you all a great rest of the day and look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Kristin.